In the beginning, Earth was nothing but dust, storms, and struggle. Life was never easy there. The weather was harsh, the land was wild, and danger was everywhere. But from that chaos, something unexpected was born: humanity. They were fragile creatures at first, small and weak compared to the animals around them. Yet there was something in them that no other creature had. A fire deep inside that refused to die. Humans learned to fight against everything that tried to destroy them. When the cold froze their bones, they made fire. When hunger came, they hunted and shared food. When storms tore down their homes, they built stronger ones. Every time nature tried to break them, they stood up again. Pain became their teacher, and survival became their skill. From the very beginning, humans understood one truth: no one was coming to save them. They had to save themselves. As centuries passed, humans became smarter. They shaped stone into weapons, built villages, and learned to work together. But even then, they never forgot how to fight. Every generation faced new challenges: wars, plagues, disasters, but they kept pushing forward. They didn't just survive. They learned, adapted, and changed. It was almost like the universe had given them an impossible test. And every time they passed it, slowly the same hands that once swung stones started shaping metal, building machines, and reaching for the stars. Their progress was not peaceful. The story of humanity was full of mistakes and pain. They fought each other for land, power, and belief. Cities rose and fell. Empires were built and destroyed. Yet each time they fell, they stood up again, stronger, wiser, and more determined. That was the strange beauty of them. Even in their darkest times, they found hope. Even when the world seemed to end, they built it again from the ashes. Then came the age of exploration. Humans left their planet and stepped into space. At first, it was curiosity that drove them, the need to know what was beyond the stars. They built ships that could cross the black ocean of space. They found new worlds and new life. But what surprised the galaxy was not their technology. It was their spirit. Humans didn't conquer new worlds. They tried to understand them. They wanted peace, friendship, and growth. The same race that once tore its own world apart now worked to bring unity wherever it went. Other civilizations watched them closely. Some found them strange. How could a species that once lived through endless wars now speak so softly about peace? To many aliens, humans seemed harmless, too emotional, too fragile, too forgiving. They saw them as dreamers, not warriors. And over time, the galaxy began to forget what humanity once was. The stories of ancient wars and great battles faded away, buried under centuries of peace. But there were a few who still remembered. Hidden deep in the records of old civilizations were stories whispered from one generation to the next. Stories of the time when humans were unstoppable. They were once called Titans, not because of their size, but because of their will. When they fought, they didn't fight to destroy. They fought to survive. And when survival was at stake, nothing could stand in their way. Yet those tales became legends, like old myths told to entertain children. No one believed they were real anymore. On Earth, people had changed too. They were tired of war and suffering. After reaching the stars, they promised themselves they would not repeat the past. They built societies that valued peace, science, and culture. They sent artists, teachers, and explorers into the galaxy instead of soldiers. They believed that true strength came from understanding, not fighting. And for a long time, it worked. The galaxy accepted them as diplomats, traders, and mediators. Humanity became the bridge that connected different species, a symbol of harmony. Life across human worlds was calm. Children grew up learning about peace treaties, not wars. The old battlefields on Earth turned into parks and museums. People studied the past but did not glorify it. They thought war was something that belonged to a different time. They were proud to have moved beyond it. But somewhere deep inside every human heart, a piece of that ancient fire still slept. Quiet, waiting, forgotten. It wasn't anger or violence. It was something more powerful. It was the unbreakable instinct to protect, to survive, to rise when everything else fell. It was part of who they were. But centuries of comfort had made them forget it existed. Humanity had become gentle but not weak. That difference was invisible to most outsiders. To the galaxy, humans were just another peaceful race that loved stories, music, and kindness. They smiled often, helped others, and avoided conflict. To the rest of the universe, they seemed harmless. But if anyone had looked deeper, if they had seen what humans endured through their history, they would have understood how wrong that belief was. Humanity was never truly tamed. They had simply chosen peace because they were tired of war. It wasn't because they couldn't fight anymore. It was because they knew exactly what war could do, and that made them even more dangerous than anyone realized. On one distant world, an old historian once said, "When a warrior chooses peace, it's not weakness, it's control." That saying was forgotten by most, but it described humanity perfectly. They had mastered their own fire and locked it away, like an ancient weapon buried deep underground. No one remembered where they came from or what they were capable of. Not even humans themselves. They were living proof that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sleeps quietly, hidden behind kindness. As time passed, the galaxy changed. New empires rose, new species appeared, and technology advanced beyond imagination. Humans continued to build friendships, travel to distant stars, and share knowledge. They became teachers and healers, poets and scientists. They spoke of love and compassion more than war or conquest. Their worlds were full of art and laughter. It seemed like the story of humanity's struggle had finally reached its happy ending, but history has a strange way of repeating itself. Every peaceful era eventually faces a test, and even though the humans didn't know it yet, a storm was waiting beyond the edges of known space. Something out there had begun to notice them. The same peaceful race that had forgotten its own shadow. To that distant enemy, humans looked like easy prey. They didn't see the strength beneath the softness. They only saw the surface. For now, though, the humans slept peacefully among the stars. They believed the galaxy was safe. They believed they had left their violent past behind. They didn't know that the universe itself still remembered. The stars, the dust, the echoes of ancient wars, all whispered the same truth. The galaxy might have forgotten what humanity truly was, but the universe never forgets. The memory of the Titans still lived in the silence of space, waiting to awaken, and when the time came, the galaxy would once again see the truth. Humans were not weak, not gentle creatures lost to time. They were the same beings who had once fought against extinction and won. They were the same species who had faced darkness and created light. But for now they lived in peace, unaware of the storm that would one day remind them of who they really were. Somewhere deep in every heart that ancient fire still flickered softly, waiting for the right moment to rise again. And when it did, the stars themselves would tremble, because the Titans never truly died. They only slept. For thousands of years, peace had become the rhythm of human life. Across hundreds of worlds, humanity had built cities that touched the sky and colonies that floated quietly among the stars. People lived longer, loved deeper, and no longer feared the unknown. War was something found only in old books, in stories told by teachers to remind children how far they had come. Everywhere you went, humans were known for their warmth. They helped other species rebuild worlds destroyed by storms. They shared medicine, art, and technology freely, never asking for anything in return. Many alien civilizations admired them for this kindness. Others simply pitied them. To some, humans looked like a race that had grown too soft, too emotional, too fragile for the harshness of space. But humans didn't care what others thought. They believed the galaxy had changed for the better, that the days of fear and fire were gone forever. On every human world there was laughter, music, and the comfort of ordinary life. The markets were full of smells from 100 worlds. Children ran through parks under twin suns. Families watched the stars, dreaming of new discoveries. Still, beneath the surface of that peace, something old and forgotten slept. It was not evil or violent. It was the ancient memory of what humanity once was. Somewhere in their hearts, every person carried it without even knowing. It was the instinct to protect, the strength to endure, the courage to rise again no matter how dark things became. But in this peaceful age, there was no reason for that part of them to awaken. It remained quiet, hidden beneath generations of calm. The galaxy, too, had forgotten what humans were capable of. For centuries, no war had touched their borders. Their fleets were meant for exploration, not destruction. Their soldiers had become peacekeepers and engineers. Their weapons were sealed away in museums, covered in dust. Other civilizations began to see humans as a harmless race, useful allies but not dangerous ones. On some distant worlds, there were whispers among alien leaders. Humans, they said, are too gentle. They no longer remember how to fight. Some laughed, saying humanity was a sleeping animal that had lost its claws. But those who had studied ancient history felt uneasy. There were old records buried deep in the archives of the stars, describing humans as something completely different, something terrifying. Those stories spoke of a time when human fleets could turn whole skies into fire. When they fought, it wasn't for conquest but survival. And when survival was at stake, they never stopped until they had won. But most of the galaxy thought those stories were only myths, old tales exaggerated by fear. After all, the humans of today were kind, patient, and peaceful. No one could imagine them as warriors. In the heart of human space, life continued quietly. People woke up to the sound of soft music instead of alarms. Children studied science and history, not battle tactics. Ships traveled between worlds carrying food, art, and knowledge. The universe felt safe, like a dream that would never end. On Earth, the cradle of humanity, oceans were clean again, forests had returned, and cities glowed with life. The scars of old wars had faded. People visited museums to see ancient tanks and ships, not fully understanding what they had once been used for. They admired them like relics of a forgotten story, never imagining that their ancestors had built those machines out of desperation and survival. Humans had truly become a race of peace. They believed that kindness was their greatest strength, and in many ways it was. They could connect with anyone. They could forgive what others couldn't. They could work together even when everything else fell apart. These qualities made them respected across the stars. But the universe is vast, and not everyone values peace. Far beyond the edges of known space, where starlight barely touched, there were civilizations that remembered humanity for different reasons. They saw peace not as strength, but as weakness. They looked at the humans' calm worlds and thought, "They have forgotten how to fight. They are no threat to us." These distant empires began to watch. Quietly, they studied human systems, their defenses, their technology. They saw exploration ships instead of war fleets, scientists instead of soldiers. They thought it was only a matter of time before they could take what they wanted. To them, humanity was just another easy target. But the humans didn't know. They trusted the galaxy. They believed that if you treated others with respect, peace would last forever. It was beautiful and dangerous. Yet not all humans were blind to the truth. Some scholars and explorers began to notice strange movements in deep space, faint signals, quiet disappearances, worlds that went silent without reason. They warned the governments of humanity, but the warnings were ignored. People believed it was nothing serious. There are no enemies left, they said. The age of war is over, so life continued. Festivals filled the cities, ships traveled freely, and everyone believed they were living in the safest time in history. They had no idea that the silence beyond the stars was not peace. It was the calm before a storm. Still, even without knowing, humans carried something inside that no one could take from them. They had been through everything the universe could throw at them. Extinction, hunger, destruction, and yet they always survived. That legacy was buried deep in their hearts, passed through every generation like a quiet heartbeat. It was this inner strength that made them different from every other species. Others were born strong, but humans had earned their strength. They had bled, cried, and lost everything many times over to understand what survival really meant. Their peace wasn't born from fear. It was born from victory. They chose peace because they had already known the cost of war. There was a saying among the older colonies, "The universe fears the day humans remember." Most people thought it was just an old quote, something poetic. But those who looked deeper into history understood its meaning. It meant that if the old fire ever woke again, the galaxy would never be the same. For now, though, that fire slept. The worlds of humanity shined bright, full of laughter and light. No one looked to the sky with fear. No one imagined that danger could come from beyond the horizon. They believed the stars were friends, not threats. On one peaceful night, a teacher stood before a group of young students, pointing to the stars. "Out there," the teacher said, "are our neighbors, our friends. We share the galaxy with many kinds of life. Together we make it better." The children smiled, their eyes full of wonder. None of them knew that in just a few decades, those same stars would witness something unimaginable. The galaxy had grown too comfortable, too quiet, and when peace lasts for too long, the universe has a way of reminding its children that balance must return. Somewhere out there, beyond the farthest colonies, something was moving in the dark. It watched, it waited, and it remembered the stories of the old titans. But humans were not afraid of darkness. Even if they had forgotten their own power, they were still the same at their core. They still carried that spark that made them human. The will to endure, the courage to protect, and the heart that could love even after everything was lost. They didn't know it yet, but the galaxy was about to learn the truth all over again. The gentle hands that built cities could also become fists of steel if pushed too far. The smiling faces that welcomed friends could become the last sight enemies would ever see if danger came. For now, though the humans slept peacefully beneath the stars, dreaming of better days, never realizing that the universe they trusted was about to test them again. And when that test came, something ancient would stir. The Titans would awaken, not because they wanted war, but because survival was in their nature. And this time the galaxy would finally remember what humanity truly was. For a long time, humanity lived under the soft glow of peace. The stars above their worlds were calm, shining like silent guardians. No one expected that peace could ever break. But history has a strange way of testing even the strongest dreams. It began quietly, so quietly that no one noticed at first. Somewhere at the edge of human space, far beyond the main colonies, a small research outpost went silent. It was a distant world with only a few hundred scientists studying strange minerals. When the communication signal stopped, the main control center assumed it was just a technical problem. Out there, signals often got lost in storms or magnetic fields, so no one worried. But then a second colony went silent, and then a third. The news spread slowly, hidden beneath layers of disbelief. Reports came from faraway traders who said they saw burned cities and drifting ships. Still, most people didn't believe them. It's just rumors, they said. Nothing can happen to us. We're safe. Weeks passed. The disappearances continued. Fleets sent to investigate didn't return. That's when the first image arrived. A broken transmission showing the last moments of one human station. It showed strange ships moving through the clouds, silent and dark, their shapes unfamiliar. Then the screen went black. No one could tell who or what they were. Fear began to spread, but the government tried to calm everyone. Messages were broadcast across human worlds saying, "There's no need to panic. We're investigating. Everything is under control." But deep down, people felt a shadow growing. Soon that shadow reached the heart of human space. The first confirmed attack came on a peaceful colony known for its art and gardens. One evening, without warning, the sky above the city turned red. Unknown ships appeared out of nowhere, blocking the sun. They didn't speak. They didn't send any message. They just started destroying everything. People ran, screaming as the ground shook. The colony's defense systems were old and unprepared. They were built to stop accidents, not wars. Within hours, the colony was gone. Millions vanished. The attackers didn't stay. They simply left after the destruction, leaving silence behind. When the news reached Earth and other human worlds, shock filled every home. For generations, humans had believed that war was over. They didn't even have armies large enough to defend all their colonies. Most of their fleets were explorers, scientists, or traders. At first, the human leaders tried to reason with whoever attacked. They sent peaceful messages asking for talks. But there was no answer, only more attacks. Each day, another colony went dark. The galaxy watched quietly. Some races offered sympathy but didn't step in. Others said nothing. Many had grown jealous of humanity's influence in the peaceful age. They whispered among themselves, saying, "Perhaps it's their time to fall." But the humans didn't give up. They grieved deeply, but beneath their sadness, something began to awaken. The same instinct that had carried them through ice ages, famines, and endless wars long ago started to rise again. At first, it was just anger. Then it became determination. People who had never held weapons before began to organize. Engineers turned factories into defense centers. Old military archives sealed for centuries were reopened. Ships that had been used for exploration were rebuilt for battle. Scientists started working day and night, designing shields, drones, and weapons using every bit of knowledge they had. The change was fast, almost frighteningly fast. Within months, a new energy filled the human worlds, a quiet fire that spread from one colony to another. People stopped feeling afraid. They started preparing. Every family, every worker, every student began to contribute in some way. Humanity, once peaceful and gentle, was beginning to remember who they really were. Across the galaxy, observers noticed the shift. "The humans are changing," some whispered. "They're waking up." But no one could predict what was coming. In the beginning, humanity's counterattacks were small. They didn't win every battle. They lost ships, cities, and lives, but each loss made them stronger. Every tragedy taught them something new. They learned faster than anyone expected. They adapted to the enemy's tactics, found weaknesses, and struck back harder. The unknown invaders soon realized they had made a terrible mistake. They thought humans would break easily, that fear would make them surrender. But instead, humanity united in a way no other species ever could. They didn't fight for power or conquest. They fought for their families, their children, their right to exist. And that made them unstoppable. In the early months, human worlds were full of chaos and rebuilding. People said goodbye to loved ones heading into space, unsure if they would ever return. Factories worked nonstop, turning out defense ships. In homes, families gathered around glowing screens to hear news from the front lines. Every victory brought hope. Every loss brought tears, but also more strength. The peace that once made them soft had also given them something precious: compassion. They didn't fight out of hatred. They fought because they couldn't stand seeing innocent lives destroyed. That made them different. The galaxy soon began to notice it too. Other civilizations watched the humans' transformation with awe. Within months, the gentle dreamers had turned into warriors again. But their war wasn't wild or cruel, it was sharp, focused, and disciplined. Humanity had rediscovered an old truth. Their greatest weapon was not their machines or ships. It was their unity, their ability to stand together when everything else collapsed. Old songs of courage and survival began to spread again. People remembered the stories of their ancestors, the ones who built empires from dust and defended their homes when the world was against them. The legends of the Titans no longer felt like myths. They felt real. They were real, because the same spirit now lived in every person across every colony, and soon the galaxy began to feel it. The same fear that had once surrounded humanity thousands of years ago started to return. Those who once mocked humans for being soft now whispered their names with respect and fear. The invaders who had started the war found themselves facing something they didn't understand. Every time they destroyed one colony, 3 more rose stronger. Every time they won a battle, humans came back with better weapons, smarter strategies, and fiercer determination. It was like fighting an ocean. You could push the waves back, but they always came again, stronger than before. No one could stop them, not even themselves. The sleeping Titans had awakened, yet even as humanity began to rise again, they never lost their heart. They saved what lives they could, protected refugees from all species, and refused to become monsters. They had remembered how to fight, but they also remembered why they must never lose their humanity. That balance, that mix of power and compassion, was what made them truly unstoppable. In the silence of space, an old saying began to echo once more: "Beware the day when humans remember." That day had come. Now, every human world stood united, their flags shining under the same light. The people who once sang songs of peace now sang songs of courage. The galaxy, watching from afar, realized what was happening. The legends were returning. Humanity was no longer a race of dreamers. They were the Titans reborn. But even then, they didn't fight for revenge. They fought for survival, for the hope that one day their children could live without fear again. Every battle they won brought them closer to that dream. Every world they saved reminded them of who they truly were. The war was far from over. Many dark days still lay ahead. But one thing was certain: the galaxy would never again see humans as harmless. The fire that had slept for thousands of years was awake now, and it burned brighter than ever. Across the stars, from the oldest worlds to the newest colonies, a quiet vow spread among the people: we didn't start this war, but we will end it. And deep in the heart of the universe, something seemed to respond. The same stars that once watched humanity rise and fall began to shine a little brighter, as if they too remembered. The Titans were back. The transformation of humanity shocked the galaxy. No one had ever seen a race change so fast. Just months ago, the humans were known for peace, art, and compassion. Their fleets explored planets, their ships carried medicine, and their people dreamed of friendship among the stars. But now the same fleets carried weapons forged in silence, and their ships moved with purpose. Humanity was no longer sleeping. When the first great counterattack began, the entire galaxy held its breath. The enemy had expected humans to beg for mercy, not rise like a storm. But the storm had already started. The first human fleet launched from the colonies near the inner worlds. It was not large, only a mix of old defense ships, Mining vessels turned into war machines, and a few experimental crafts designed for exploration. Many of the pilots were not trained soldiers. They were engineers, traders, and workers who had learned to fight because they had to. But inside every one of them burned the same fire, the determination to protect what they loved. When the battle began, it was chaos. The enemy had advanced technology and heavy ships, but they didn't expect humans to fight with such cleverness. Instead of meeting them head-on, humans adapted fast. They used surprise attacks, traps, and teamwork. They thought differently, acted unpredictably, and fought as if every moment was their last. And slowly, the tide began to turn. The first human victory was small, a single enemy base destroyed on a frozen moon. But when the news reached the human worlds, it felt like the stars themselves had lit up brighter. For the first time in months, people had hope. The streets filled with cheers, and even those who had lost everything found a reason to believe again. From that moment, everything changed. Humanity no longer waited for help. They became their own saviors. Old factories, once silent, roared back to life. Scientists and builders worked side by side, creating ships faster and stronger than ever before. On every world, volunteers lined up to serve. It didn't matter who they were, farmers, teachers, or artists. They all had the same goal: to protect their people and make sure this never happened again. Even the galaxy's other civilizations, who had once doubted humans, started to pay attention. They watched the humans rise from ashes and fight with unity that seemed impossible. It was not the strength of their machines that frightened them. It was the strength of their spirit. The enemy tried to crush them again. Massive fleets moved toward human space, confident they could still win through sheer power. But every attack they made was met with something unexpected, resistance that grew stronger every time. The humans learned from every loss, studied every defeat, and turned pain into power. In space near one of the older colonies, a fierce battle lasted for days. The sky above the planet was filled with fire. Human ships were smaller, but they fought with precision and courage. Pilots gave everything to protect the lives below. When the smoke cleared, humanity had held the line. That day, millions across the galaxy realized something the enemy had not. Humanity's strength wasn't in their weapons, it was in their heart. While fleets fought in the stars, people on the ground worked tirelessly. Cities damaged by attacks were rebuilt faster than anyone thought possible. Every person helped another. When supplies ran low, they shared. When they were tired, they kept going anyway. Children painted banners with words of hope. Old people volunteered to help in shelters. It wasn't just a war anymore. It was a movement of survival, love, and unity. The transformation spread far beyond the battlefield. Engineers who once built art installations were now designing ships that could outmaneuver any enemy. Scientists who had studied plants were now finding ways to grow food in destroyed environments. Everyone had a role and everyone mattered. Humanity had become one single heartbeat across 1,000 worlds. The galaxy began to whisper again, the same words it had spoken long ago. The Titans have returned. At first it was just a saying among traders, but soon everyone started using it. The idea spread that humanity was not just fighting. They were remembering. They were becoming what they once were: protectors, warriors, and survivors. And with each new victory, humanity began to feel that truth more deeply. Yet, even in their strength, they never became cruel. They didn't destroy for pleasure. They didn't seek revenge against the innocent. Every human leader reminded their people that they were fighting to defend life, not to take it. That's what made them different from their enemies. They fought with discipline, with purpose, and with heart. In the darkness of space, their ships became symbols of courage. Whenever a human fleet arrived to protect a world under attack, people cheered. It was said that when humans came to fight, the stars themselves seemed to glow warmer. They brought hope wherever they went. Other alien races who had once watched from afar now began to help. Seeing humanity's courage reminded them of their own strength. One by one, small worlds joined the humans, forming a growing alliance. They shared technology, ships, and knowledge. Together, they became a shield against the spreading threat. Still, the cost of the war was heavy. Lives were lost every day. Entire cities were turned to dust. Families cried for loved ones who never came back, but humans carried their grief differently. Instead of letting it break them, they let it shape them. Every loss became a reason to fight harder, to protect the living and honor the fallen. Across every human world, people built walls of remembrance. Names of those who gave their lives were carved into stone, so they would never be forgotten. People would come, lay flowers, and promise to keep fighting for peace. The galaxy, which once thought humans were harmless, now saw something else. A people who could turn pain into strength, and despair into determination. As time passed, humanity's fleets grew larger and more advanced. Their ships, once patched together with scrap and hope, now shined with new armor and technology developed through endless effort. The humans began to push back, reclaiming the colonies that had been lost. For the first time since the war began, the enemy began to retreat. They couldn't understand how a race that had seemed so weak could become this strong. Their fear spread. In every human home, people watched the news with tears and pride. They saw images of soldiers returning, battered but alive. They saw planets once covered in fire now shining with light again. The galaxy had tried to erase humanity, but instead, it had reminded them of their true nature. The humans had rediscovered something they had forgotten for centuries. Their power was not in destruction, but in their refusal to give up. They could bend, but they would never break. By now, even the oldest beings in the galaxy began to remember the ancient stories, the ones told in hushed voices. When the humans awaken, the stars will tremble, and tremble they did. Humanity's rise changed everything. Even their enemies began to fear them, not just because of their weapons, but because of their will. The humans did not fight like any other species. They didn't see war as glory. They saw it as duty. They didn't fight for control. They fought for every child, every friend, every future sunrise. Soon their victories became impossible to ignore. Systems that had fallen were reclaimed one after another. The enemy's advance slowed, then stopped. Humanity stood tall again, bloodied but unbroken. But even in victory, they stayed humble. They didn't claim new lands or demand tribute. They simply rebuilt, repaired, and offered peace to those who would take it. Because deep down they still remembered who they were before the war. The dreamers, the builders, the artists. They didn't fight because they loved war. They fought because they loved peace. That was the truth that made them different. And that truth began to echo across the stars. The galaxy watched as humans rebuilt the worlds they had saved, planting trees where craters once were, lighting candles for those lost, and promising that peace would return again. But this time no one would ever dare to call them weak. Everyone knew now what humanity truly was. They were not the gentle race that others had once mocked. They were the titans, the guardians, the survivors, the hearts of the galaxy. And as their ships sailed across the endless night, a silent vow spread through the stars. Never again will we forget who we are. The fire that had once slept for centuries now burned strong and steady. It was not the fire of destruction, but the fire of purpose, courage, and love. The humans had awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The war that had once seemed endless was finally slowing down. Humanity had taken back most of its lost worlds. The enemy, who had once roared with confidence, now moved quietly through the stars, avoiding direct battles. For the first time in generations, human colonies could look up at the night sky and see peace slowly returning. But even peace felt strange after everything that had happened. People had changed. The children who grew up during the war had learned to survive before they learned to dream. The adults who once spent their days in comfort now carried memories they could never forget. Still, humanity continued to rebuild not just their homes, but their hearts. On the planets that had been burned and ruined, people came together to plant again. The same hands that once built weapons were now used to plant seeds. Factories that had made armor now produced solar panels, clean energy units, and machines to repair the land. Every day was a reminder that humanity was not meant only for war. They were meant to live, to create, and to hope. In the quiet moments, people began to ask questions. Who were they now? Were they still the peaceful explorers of old, or had war changed them forever? Many feared that the darkness of battle might never truly fade. But there were also those who believed something different. They said that the war had not broken humanity. It had only reminded them of who they were meant to be. Across the galaxy, humans began to explore again. Not with fleets of war, but with missions of rebuilding. They traveled to broken planets, helping even those who had once fought against them. That's what made them different. While others fought to destroy, humans fought to heal. Some alien races were still cautious. They remembered the terrible power humanity had unleashed when pushed too far. But when they saw humans building schools, sharing food and restoring life on shattered worlds, their fear slowly turned into respect. In the deep corners of space, rumors spread again. Not of human weapons this time, but of human kindness. Stories told of human engineers repairing the cities of old allies. Others told of human doctors saving the lives of their former enemies. Even when no one asked them to help, they did it anyway. That was the power of humanity. Not just their strength, but their heart. Still far from the peaceful zones, there were shadows moving. Remnants of the enemy still existed. Hidden fleets, secret bases, and old warlords who refused to surrender. They were broken but dangerous. And they all had one thing in common: fear. They feared that one day humans might come for them. Not out of hate, but out of justice. Human leaders, however, made a choice that surprised everyone. Instead of chasing revenge, they offered peace. They sent messages across the stars saying, "The war is over. The past cannot be undone, but the future can still be written." It was a simple message, but it carried great weight. Many enemies ignored it, but some listened. Slowly, old enemies came out of hiding. They laid down their weapons and joined the rebuilding effort. Humanity accepted them, not as foes, but as partners. It wasn't easy. There were disagreements, mistakes, and pain. But humans didn't give up. They knew real peace wasn't made with words, it was made with forgiveness and effort. On one distant colony, a group of survivors built a great monument. It wasn't to honor the war, but the peace that followed. The monument showed two hands, one human, one alien, lifting a broken planet together. Underneath were carved the words, "Strength is not in power, but in unity." The image spread across the galaxy, becoming a symbol of hope. Even the oldest species in the stars, who had once watched humans with fear, began to see them differently. They saw a race that had walked through fire and come out shining brighter, but deep inside many humans still carried questions. If they were truly the titans of the galaxy, what did that mean for their future? Would they always need to fight to prove their strength? Or could they finally rest? The answer came slowly, through the actions of ordinary people. It wasn't the soldiers or the leaders who showed what humanity truly was. It was the farmers, the builders, the healers, the artists. They were the ones who gave meaning to the peace that had been earned through so much pain. In one city, once destroyed by war, a young artist began to paint giant murals across the broken walls. Her art showed scenes of stars, people holding hands, and ships flying not to fight but to explore. Every morning, crowds gathered to watch her paint, and for the first time in years, people smiled without fear. In another place, a group of old engineers took apart one of the massive warships that had once led battles. They turned it into a floating garden, a place where families could walk under open skies and remember that even machines of war could become symbols of life. That was humanity's greatest gift, the ability to turn even pain into beauty. But peace didn't mean forgetting. The memory of the war stayed alive, not to bring hate, but to remind future generations of what could happen when darkness was ignored. Every year, people across the colonies held a moment of silence, not for victory, but for peace. They remembered those who had fought, those who had fallen, and those who had forgiven. It became a tradition that united all of humanity, no matter how far apart they lived. Meanwhile, far beyond human space, explorers discovered ancient ruins, structures built thousands of years before by unknown hands. In those ruins, they found carvings of humans. Not recent ones, but ancient depictions, giant figures with shining eyes standing among the stars. It shocked everyone. The carvings were older than any record of human space travel. How could that be? Scientists and historians studied them for years, and slowly a new theory formed. Maybe humanity had been to the stars once before. Maybe they had been titans in a forgotten age, and then fallen asleep, losing their memories over the passing of time. If that was true, then the recent war hadn't made them titans. It had only awakened what was already inside them. The idea spread quickly across every colony. Some called it legend, others called it truth. But everyone agreed on one thing. Humanity had rediscovered itself. Now when human ships flew through the stars, they didn't move like before. They didn't carry the weight of fear. They carried pride, purpose, and peace. Every pilot who looked out into the endless black of space knew they were part of something greater than themselves. Even the stars seemed to whisper again, like they had done in the ancient times. The Titans are awake once more. One evening, as the twin suns set over a rebuilt city, a group of people stood together on a hill, looking at the horizon. The sky was painted in orange and gold. They had seen war, loss, and rebirth, and now, for the first time in their lives, they saw a future worth living for. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. The silence was full of understanding. They had come a long way, from dust to hope, from fear to strength. In that moment, humanity realized something powerful. Being a Titan didn't mean being unstoppable. It didn't mean ruling others. It meant standing up after every fall, helping others rise, and never forgetting the light inside. The galaxy had feared them once. Now it looked to them for guidance. Humanity had changed the stars, not through domination, but through compassion. And as the night fell, their ships lit the sky once again. But this time it wasn't a fleet of war. It was a fleet of peace, carrying builders, healers, and dreamers to every corner of the galaxy. Their mission was no longer survival. It was renewal. Humanity had remembered who they truly were, and the galaxy would never forget it again. The galaxy had grown quiet again. For the first time in centuries, the stars no longer echoed with war or fear. The wounds that once stretched across worlds were beginning to heal. Broken cities were alive with laughter again. The dark skies that once carried fire now shimmered with calm silver light. But even in that peace, everyone knew. The story of humanity was far from over. Across thousands of worlds, humans continued to rebuild. Every city carried signs of what they had endured, scars, memories, and monuments to those who never returned. But those scars didn't bring sadness anymore. They brought strength. They reminded everyone what it truly meant to be human. People no longer saw themselves as survivors of war. They saw themselves as keepers of peace. And yet somewhere deep inside they still carried that ancient fire. Quiet but alive. The same fire that had once made the galaxy tremble. Many species had come to live beside humans now. Trade routes were open again. Embassies were built and shared cities rose on neutral planets. In these new worlds, humans worked shoulder to shoulder with others, building something far greater than any single race could achieve alone. But even as peace spread, something strange began to happen. Across distant systems, old signals started to wake. Not human, not alien, but something far older. It was as if the universe itself was remembering. Explorers started finding ruins buried deep under ancient worlds. Inside there were carvings and writings that told forgotten stories. Stories of beings who looked human, tall, bright, powerful, who had once shaped the stars with their hands. No one knew if they were myths or truth. One discovery, however, changed everything. On a planet near the galactic center, a human exploration team uncovered an enormous chamber buried beneath mountains of crystal. Inside that chamber stood statues, dozens of them, shaped exactly like humans but towering and radiant, carved from stone that glowed faintly like it still remembered light. At the center of the chamber was a massive inscription written in a language no one had seen before. It took weeks to decode, but when it was finally translated, the word stunned everyone. It said, "When they forget who they are, the stars will dim. When they remember, the universe will awaken." Those words spread like fire through every colony and every ship. Scholars studied them, leaders quoted them, and ordinary people whispered them in wonder. Was it possible? Had humanity truly walked among the stars long before history began? Old legends came back to life. Stories told by the elders, of beings of light who once guided creation, of wars that reshaped galaxies, suddenly didn't feel like fairy tales anymore. It was as if the galaxy itself had been waiting for humanity to remember, but this time, they were different. The Titans of the past might have been conquerors. The humans of today were builders, healers, and protectors. Their strength wasn't in domination, it was in compassion. And maybe that was why the universe had waited so long for them to awaken again. One night, as the Human Council met on a world that floated peacefully in the middle of a starlit sea, a signal appeared in the skies. It wasn't a message from any known species. It came from beyond mapped space, from the deep, silent edge of the galaxy where no one had ever gone. It was a sound more than a message, a soft pulse that echoed across every human device, every ship, every station. It wasn't dangerous, just hauntingly familiar. It felt almost like a heartbeat, Scientists studied it and discovered something unbelievable. The signal carried fragments of human DNA, patterns so precise they couldn't be natural. Someone or something out there was calling humanity. For the first time since the war ended, humans gathered their fleets again, not for battle, but for discovery. They called it the final journey. Ships from every colony, every allied race joined them. It wasn't a mission of fear. It was a mission of destiny. As the fleet moved into the unknown, every person felt it, a strange pull like being called home. The further they went, the brighter the stars seemed to grow. Finally, after months of travel, they reached the edge of the galaxy. And there, in the darkness beyond, they saw something impossible. A ring, larger than any planet, made of light and stone, floating silently in the void. It wasn't a machine or a weapon. It looked more like a doorway. When their ships approached, the ring began to hum. Energy readings spiked, but no weapon systems activated. It was peaceful, welcoming. The same heartbeat-like signal pulsed from it again, this time stronger. Then in the center of the ring, light began to gather, swirling, glowing, forming shapes. And for a brief moment, everyone saw them. Shadows of enormous figures standing among the stars. Human in form, radiant and still. They didn't speak in words, but every person felt their presence inside their heart. A voice, calm and deep, seemed to whisper from everywhere at once. "You are the children who forgot the dawn. You are the spark we left behind. The time of sleeping is over. The time of becoming begins." And then the vision faded. The ring dimmed, leaving silence. But humanity didn't need more explanation. They understood. They weren't becoming titans again. They already were. They always had been. They just needed to remember. From that day, everything changed. Humanity entered a new age, not of conquest, but of creation. Their knowledge grew faster than ever before. Their ships reached beyond the old maps, touching corners of the universe no one had ever seen. They built great academies where every race could learn together. They created new forms of life, gentle, intelligent beings born from science and art combined. They healed planets that had been dead for ages, turning deserts into gardens again. And through it all, they never forgot their past. They never forgot the pain, the wars, or the silence. Those memories became their strength, reminders of what must never happen again. The galaxy changed too. Where once there had been fear, there was now unity. Where there had been walls, there were bridges. Humanity didn't lead the galaxy through command. They led through example. The old title of Titan no longer meant destruction or war. It came to mean guardian. And that's what humanity became, guardians of life, of peace and of the stars themselves. Generations later, children across many worlds would look up at the night sky and ask their elders, "Who are the humans?" And the elders would smile and say, "They are the ones who remembered," because it was never about power. It was about awakening, about realizing that strength isn't just in battle. It's in rebuilding, forgiving, and protecting what truly matters. And so, the story of the Titans came full circle. The galaxy no longer feared them. It looked to them for light. Even the oldest civilizations, the ones who had seen countless ages rise and fall, bowed their heads in quiet respect. They understood now what the humans had always carried, the spark that had lit the first stars. In time, the great ring at the edge of the galaxy became a symbol of unity. People from all races traveled there to pay respect, not to gods or rulers, but to the eternal idea that lived within every being, the will to rise again. And above that glowing ring, under endless stars, a single phrase was written across the sky by the light of human ships: "We remember." As the last ship disappeared into the horizon, the stars shimmered brighter than ever before. The universe seemed to breathe again. Humanity was no longer lost, no longer sleeping. They had become what they were always meant to be, the heart of the galaxy, the keepers of balance, the guardians of tomorrow. The Titans had awakened, and this time they would never fall asleep again.